Welcome to Survival Strategies for Anyone Who Loves a Gambling Addict. Together, we'll learn to build a bubble around ourselves where peace, joy, serenity, and financial security can exist, regardless of what our gamblers choose to do and the chaos they create. This podcast is intended for mature audiences and includes topics and language that may not be suitable for young children. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Jodi Holstein. I am the host of Survival Strategies for Anyone Who Loves a Gambling Addict. And I'm being joined today by Melissa. Melissa has been hosting the podcast Making Bets in a Burning House for quite some time. And today we are going to do a crossover episode. It will be able to be heard on my podcast as well as Making Bets in a Burning House. So I am going to open up by saying thank you, Melissa, for being willing to do this.
No, thank you, Jodi. This is a great opportunity. I feel like we really need to be there for everybody in this very, very small area. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of us out there, so we really need to support each other.
I agree. How about if we start by you giving the Cliff's Notes version of how you ended up in this space for my listeners, and I'll give a quick Cliff's Notes when you're done.
Sure, sure. So I was married, I was with my ex-husband for 17 years, and I didn't know anything about gambling addiction. I just thought that that was his family thing. I wanted to get out of debt. He did not, so we ended up getting a divorce. Years later, my current husband kind of got into gambling and it escalated from there. When he told me he had a problem, I said, "You know what? We need to figure out how to fix this because I'm not going down the divorce road again because of something like this." And at that time, I have to say that I finally was able to look back at my previous marriage and see that it was actually a gambling addiction because I knew a little bit more about it at that point. And so fast forward, we're 3 years in recovery. I've been going to Gam-Anon for 3 plus years. So, we have a happy ending with this one. And then I decided to start the podcast because there's just not a lot of information out there for family, friends, anybody who is impacted by a compulsive gambler. So what about you, Jody?
Well, I wish I could say that was a new development. I have been around for a little over 30, almost 35 years, maybe a little over 35 years. Uh, I knew that he was recovered from gambling. At least that's what he said. We got married a year after we met, and I just started discovering one issue after another that wasn't disclosed before we got married. He hadn't attended GA for 5 years at that point. We started to go back to GA when I discovered I was the third ex-wife, and I thought, "Man, this is a problem, and it's outside my wheelhouse. I don't know how to fix this." He did not actually gamble, but he never addressed any of his personality defects or any of the other addictions that go with gambling disorder, the lying, the gaslighting, the cheating, the con, all of that. We lost several homes. It was finally in, I want to say it was 2005 that my husband finally went, "You know what? I don't want to live this way anymore." And that's what it required. It required him saying, "I don't want to live this way anymore." And we continue to go. He has reached that 43-year mark of sobriety from gambling. But even he will tell you, gosh, there was a long time in there where he was gambling with all kinds of other things like relationship with kids, marriage, job. There are all kinds of gambles that were taking place. So we are kind of the poster children for what happens if you only stop the gambling.
Mhm. Yes.
So that's my story.
And it's a beautiful story because look at I never would have met you.
That is
So
true.
I have to look at the positive sides of this. Um, I have to know, one of the things that I came across in this is that I found that with my current husband, our communication ability went through the roof. Like, we actually sit down and or we just say stuff like, "Hey, I need to talk to you about things." I never had that kind of thing with my ex-husband. And the all of this that is has been happening with my current husband, I've this is a relationship like no other relationship I've ever had. I've always been too afraid to bring things up or make somebody mad or, those types of things. How has the communication been since that fateful day when you moved out of your last house?
The overhaul in our relationship is almost unrecognizable. We did not have great communication before. As a matter of fact, my husband was a withdrawer and so he just shut down. I could sit down in the living room with him and keep talking and keep talking and he would give me nothing. And now it is quite the opposite. As a matter of fact, he will claim his time. He will look at me and say, "I wasn't done. I wasn't done." And we are able to discuss and overcome things that really the average relationship struggles with.
Mhm,
And so when I tell people in my rooms, look, if you get through recovery and you get to that other side of recovery, what you have is a relationship that is transformed
mhm.
and so much stronger than anything you could have imagined before. We had one of our rooms in our house converted to a bourbon room. And so
Oh, my husband would be so jealous. "Shh, quiet, quiet."
and we sit in there every bit of 4 nights a week. And he gets done with work, I get done with work, and we sit down and we just spend an hour talking about how our day has gone, any issues, what we're looking forward to. And that is well, quite frankly, it's just a miracle.
Yes. Gosh, that is so beautiful because I like to sit outside, and so there's about 6 months of the year where we can't do that because I live in Southern Nevada, but, um, I will go and sit outside, and he will come out with me, and we will sit there and talk, and it's so nice, like, we don't have our phones, the
Right.
TV isn't on, or if it is on, my favorite channels are the YouTube channels where there's, like, a beach scene and there's just jazz music playing in the background, love those, but we will just sit there and talk, like you said, and we just have conversations about what happened during the day. I'm a caretaker for my parents, so I talk about how I made it through the day without killing them, these types of things. So, we actually have a good time together, and it's so amazing to just sit there and just talk to this person, and I honestly believe that this person is now my best friend, my soulmate, my everything, and I cannot imagine a day without him there.
That is very true. And I will say, as I look back on a 30 almost 36-year marriage, and I see the transformation from someone who, as a parent, was relatively disconnected. I mean, he was disconnected. Over COVID, I made the decision I was going to convert all of our little cassettes that you would get out of your video camera. I was
Yes.
gonna convert them all to video files that I could put on my YouTube channel. And so I would take a couple in and get them back, and then take a couple more in and get them back, and we, over COVID, watched them, and his response was, "Oh my god, I wasn't there. Where am I?" And that was a harsh moment for him, a moment of reality. And now, we've got a daughter. We have 3 weddings in 19 months. Thank you very much. We had one
I
last
can't
June,
even imagine that. Ugh.
1 coming up in about 6 weeks, and then we'll have another one in March. But his wanting to be present and wanting to be available and taking in every moment, that's the person I have today. And that is the result of working really hard on oneself. And I even have to remind my kids, my daughter especially, because she's getting married, so she wants her husband to look just like her dad right now, and I have to keep reminding her, look, this was not what we looked like in the beginning. This is what you work toward, and but it is a great accomplishment. But we do have to credit him going to GA and me going to Gamanon, working the program together, taking advantage of the things that are offered in the program. He had sponsors early on. He's a sponsor now. We had 2 pressure reliefs through GA, and we have been the pressure relief facilitators for probably over 20 years. So, keeping that going, being willing to pay it forward is really important, because I see a difference in him every time he sponsors somebody, every time he chairs a meeting, every time we do a pressure relief. It enhances his place in his recovery.
And I agree with that. I just did another podcast recording yesterday, and she told me, she goes, "I actually do a lot of this work that I'm doing for myself
Mhm.
because I feel so much better helping other people, and it inspires me and it energizes me." And she just was talking about how good it makes her feel to be able to help people that are in our situation, and I have to agree. I will tell you, there was a time last year when there was a lot of things changing with the podcast, and I kind of fell into a depression, and I didn't do recordings for several months. I had done a ton of recordings before, so I got really lucky that I could post all those, but I didn't do any recordings for several months, and I actually thought, "You know what? I'm not gonna carry on with this podcast." People aren't finding it, they don't need it, blah, 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 and, I when I had finally decided that I was gonna stop doing the podcast, I actually got a Facebook message. Somebody had found the podcast, and they had said, "Your podcast saved my marriage," and, uh I started thinking about it, and then I recorded my next episode of the podcast, and I could not believe the difference that I felt recording that podcast, knowing that somebody out there was gonna listen to it, even if it was just one person out there that was listening to it. And that was when I decided, "You know what? No matter how I feel, I've gotta move forward with this podcast," because even if one person finds it in the whole time that it's out there, it still is helping somebody, and that is that just makes me feel incredible that somebody would say that to me, like, "You helped me." And those pressure relief meetings, oh my gosh, like, people don't realize how much those make a difference, and I know a lot of people don't even take advantage of them. So for you to do that and to be helping people with that, and can you explain to our listeners, because I haven't really talked about the pressure relief on my podcast, but can you explain to the listeners exactly what you do in those pressure relief?
I can. And let me start by saying, there was a time when the pressure relief was really all we had. That was it. There wasn't a counselor you could go to that would help you through this process. And so, right now, if you go to a certified gambling counselor, those certified gambling counselors are trained to really work through some of these complex financial issues. But a pressure relief is not just financial. We have to remember that we are asking someone whose sole coping mechanism was gambling, aligned with cheating, lying, and all that other lovely stuff that goes with it. We are asking them to never use that coping mechanism again. Okay. So now what do we do with all of these pressures that are still going to come up? Because guess what? Life happens. It's not going to stop for you to get yourself right. And I always say in my room, God, you want a pressure relief because what happens in most relationships, with the spouses especially, is that the gambler will say, okay, take over the finances. I'm fine. You can take over the finances. Just take them. And all the pressure to make chicken soup out of chicken shit, basically, uh, falls on the wife or the non gambling spouse. And a lot of times they think, well, that's normal. That's just what I have to do now. No, that's actually not what you want to do. And so I encourage pressure reliefs just to relieve that gambling person of the pressure they're feeling. And so the first day of our pressure relief meeting is really going over all of those other pressures. Your family pressures, pressures you might have with parents, pressures you might have with siblings, pressures you will have with your relationship. How about with your kids? How about with your church? How about with your job? Many of these people haven't been working a great job. They haven't been working as a great employee. And the interesting thing, Melissa, is when we do the pressure relief, we'll say to the gambler, "Well, tell us about some other pressures you might be dealing with. We'll work on those first." And they'll go, "Oh, well, I'm feeling pretty good. Everything's out in the open. Not feeling too much in the way of pressure. I'm feeling good." And then you look at the spouse and you go, "Why don't you tell us about the pressures you're feeling?" And that's when you'll hear all the other pressures. And that's when the gambler, sometimes for the first time, connects that their behavior has caused an incredible amount of pressure on their spouse and their family. And we start connecting that behavior with the consequences. The consequences are your wife has been lying to your parents for 5 years, or your wife has been, representing at church in a way that you guys are fine in a hypocritical light, and that's had a lot of pressure on her, and so usually when the spouse is done, we circle back around to the gambler and say, "Okay, now how about you?" And they'll go, "Oh, I guess I do have pressures," because a gambler has lived in a space where the only pressure they've ever felt is gambling related. Pressure to either gamble or pressure to pay debts so that they can be freed up financially to gamble more. That's the only pressure they've allowed their brain to feel. So the first day, and it does take a full day, is really talking about these pressures. And now what are some strategies you can use? What are some things you might incorporate? And especially for spouses, it is really easy for your whole life to be consumed by this whole gambling addiction thing. And so we talk about how, as a married couple, how do you put boundaries around that? How do you make sure you're making time for each other? You're going on date nights. You're really prioritizing time as a couple without gambling being a part. That's the first day. At the end of the first day, we go over a financial accounting that the gambler has provided, and it's always not great. This financial accounting they do, even though they have stopped gambling, is the equivalent of what you would expect from a 12-year-old. They don't know how much they spend on clothes. "Oh, I don't need to buy new clothes," they'll say. I don't need to buy new clothes." "When's the last time you've been to a doctor or a dentist?" "Oh, I don't go to the doctor or the dentist." Okay." And we take what they've given us and we start asking questions like, "What do you pay for groceries?" "Oh, I don't know. I don't buy groceries." And they'll leave it blank, like it doesn't matter. We get good numbers, and then what happens is I take those numbers, I put them in a spreadsheet, and I put them in a spreadsheet for one reason and one reason only, and that is to get the final report. And the final report on the second day, and this too will be a full day, we go through every single line item of this, and it is a 7 or 8 tab worksheet that I've put together. It includes, do you go on vacation? How much do you spend on vacation? Do you have life insurance? Do you think it's important to have life insurance since you have a family? We go through everything. And then the final report that spits out um, shows the gambler who absolutely every single time says, "Oh, yeah, I don't think there's going to be any problem with me getting my debt paid off in a year." That's that is the common communication. And you put it together and you go, okay, here is what your life would look like if your wife died tomorrow and her income went away. Okay. You are $4,000 a month shy of being able to make your living expense bills. You have no money to pay back your gambling debt. That's what your life would look like if your wife was gone. The second column, and this is really important because a lot of spouses do this. The second column we look at is okay, you just put your money together and you say, okay, we're going to tackle this together. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine, and we're just going to tackle it together. So you take both incomes and you measure it against what the living expenses are, and what's left out of that, you can put toward gambling expenses. Okay, lots of people do that. Wouldn't recommend it. The reason I wouldn't recommend it is the next column we look at. And the next column says, oh, no, no, you, gambler, pay 50% of the living expenses. Your spouse pays 50% of the living expenses. Whatever she has left out of her income after paying for everything we've accounted for here is hers. It's hers. She can do with it whatever she wants. She wants to go on a vacation with the girls. She can go on a vacation with the girls. She's earned it. That's her money. She wants to put it in a savings account for her kids. She can do that. It's her money. You, on the other hand, sir, have $142.32 a month to put toward your gambling debt. And often what we hear is, "Oh, yeah, I pay this particular vendor $2,000 a month." Okay. Well, we're looking at the numbers, my friend. It's not you paying that $2,000 a month. It's your wife paying that $2,000 a month. And now you know why she is irritable. You know why she is bitter. You know why she struggles with recurring resentment because she's the one paying for your debt. So now let's talk about how you can increase that number on your side of this column. Do we need to get a second job? Do we need to get a better job? It's very common that gamblers will uh, they will have jobs that don't make a lot of money because those jobs don't require a lot of them. They can gamble. So now let's talk about it. Can you afford that boat? Can you afford those ski-doos? Can you afford some of the things that you have here? And I've heard gamblers actually say, "Well, this says we need to buckle down." Um, his spouse did not have to say anything to him when he said that. I said it. We? We need to buckle down? I don't think we need to do anything. I think she makes 3 times more money than you do. That's not your money. You need to buckle down, my friend. So in these meetings, they hear some very harsh truths, and those truths don't have to come from the spouse. They come from the other people in the meeting. And if you are a married person doing a pressure relief, we always have 2 married couples performing the pressure relief because recovery looks different if you are a single person versus a married person.
Very true. Very true. I'll bet I can't even imagine the shock on their face when you tell them these things.
Every time, it is shock every time. It doesn't matter how much or how little they make. It doesn't matter how much or little their gambling debt. It is a shock every single time. And those that walk away from that meeting and go, "Okay, here's what it is. Here's how it is. Now we're gonna take this information. We are going to incorporate the best plan and budget for us based on this information. We may make an appointment with GamFin. Maybe they've got some investments that they need to have looked at, which are complicated things way outside our wheelhouse. It might be a simple situation where they can incorporate an app or something like that just to help with the budgeting. But they take that information and the hard work then begins for them. The one thing we do see a lot of with finances is we see either the wife taking on all the finances, or we see this, we're just splitting it 50-50. He's got these bills he's going to pay, I've got these bills I'm going to pay. We have two separate silos, and neither one of those is healthy in this particular situation. So we're always coming in and saying, okay, here's why you don't separate the finances like that. And here's why you don't put it all on her and walk away. Uh,
Mm.
and and really encourage that weekly finance meeting. My husband and I still do this every Sunday. We sit down, we go over the finances. My husband is 12 years older than me, which means he likes his little yellow legal pad, and he writes down everything that we owe and when it's due and what the amount is. And I get on the computer and I make sure the bills are paid. Yep, that came out. That came out. We talk about what's happening moving forward. I mentioned we've got a wedding coming up, which means he's looked at my credit card bill and went, "What?" So you know, we have those conversations. Still, it's not a punishment. We don't do it because he's a gambler. Every financial guru out there will tell you a healthy relationship includes both of you involved in the finances. It's getting a gambler back to living a normal way of life.
Yes, and what the statistics out there for marriages and things like that, like either why they end in divorce or why they have problems, and I believe the number one thing in there is finances. The number one reason why, like, marriages end in divorce or there's tension in the marriage is because of finances. So, I started following a financial guy back in the day, and that's when I did my first budget, let's see, that would have been 2009, and I think I had to do it 4 or 5 times, and I cried every time because I could not figure out how to make the budget work in a way that we were paying all of our bills. I I didn't know what to do. But now it keeps my anxiety at bay doing a budget. I love having a budget, even though it doesn't really change that much right now, because everything is pretty much the same. But if there was things that came up, you know, I know where my money is going. I know where it is, and it just helps me to breathe better.
That ambiguity around what's coming next.
Uh-huh.
Are we going to be able to make it work?
Mhm.
That ambiguity creates so much stress. And what's really important for families, for spouses, and parents to recognize is if your gambler is still gambling, making a budget is a great big waste of time.
Yeah.
Can't do it. You could maybe make a budget for yourself if you have your own income. But I know for me, I was a stay at home mom for 10 years. I didn't have my own income. So for those people who come into our room that have little kids and their contribution is being a stay at home mom, which has great value and actually can be monetized, uh, they feel really, really helpless. What do? I don't contribute financially. I can't make him turn his account over to me. I don't even have any money coming in. That is really a scary place to be. And I have never had anyone ask this in 35 years, but we can also sit down with those people and say, okay, what are some things we can do to maybe mitigate some of the ambiguity? And what's interesting is we've never had more visibility into what's happening with our money. I mean, you can go onto your husband's account and see what he's done, and he can go onto your account and see what you've done. That visibility is not creating peace. As a matter of fact, I had one gal in my room say, every day I go onto my husband's bank account 3 or 4 times a day. I go onto his credit cards 3 or 4 times a day. And we had to have a conversation about, do you think this is healthy? This is the insanity we speak of. And she followed it up by saying, I'm doing everything I can, but I still live with this impending sense of dread. Well, that's because you know your spouse has not committed to stop gambling. And every time you go in there, you are looking for crisis. You're looking for that evidence that you were unsuccessful to stop. It's already happened. That's why you're seeing it. Stop that. And she stopped it and she said, oh, I feel so much better
Uh-huh.
because it's not helping you.
It's not. It's not. The frustration behind that because you feel lack of being able to do anything. I can understand why she would do that, but it's only making things worse.
Right, for her. And our goal is we want to make things better. When people come into my room, I'm like, okay, what do you need? What do you need today that's going to make next week feel a little better for you? And it's never, oh, I need to look at my spouse's bank account more often. That's never the answer. And it's unfortunate. There's so much inconsistency from room to room in the GA and Gam-Anon world.
I agree.
Um, that is it. I'm very frustrated by that. There isn't a damn thing I can do about it, but I'm very frustrated about it. And for there are some GA rooms that don't even talk about pressure relief, even though it is part of their page 17, that list of things that a gambler should do if they want to stay clean. Uh, they don't offer it. They don't talk about it. There are some rooms that don't even do sponsorships. And that's baffling to me. It says that there's some toxic behavior going on in that room. But I wanna make sure people know it's not only available, but I'd be happy to work with you on a one-on-one basis outside the room if you want me to, because we know the sooner you can get a gambler who has said, "You know what? I gotta stop this. I gotta stop gambling." The sooner you can get that person to connect their behavior and their consequences and their Financial decision making and accountability, the sooner you can do that, the better the chance that the recovery is going to stick.
Yeah. Yes, and, I kind of liken it to, McDonald's or Starbucks or one of those types of things. If you go into one of those restaurants, you should expect to be able to get a hamburger or a latte or whatever in Starbucks in Las Vegas at as the same as Starbucks in New York. That they make these recipes, they design them, they test them, they do all of this stuff, and GA and Gam-Anon should be the same. If you walk into that GA meeting or that Gam-Anon meeting, you should be able to get the same treatment, the same information that I'm getting in Southern Nevada, and you should be getting it in Texas or Michigan or something like that. But we even have meetings just across the valley that don't ever talk about Gam-Anon. They don't recommend it. There are people in these GA meetings that don't even know that Gam-Anon exists. And why is that? Why, when we know that if somebody has somebody by their side helping them, they're have a million times more likelihood that they will be successful in this endeavor that they're going on. But gambling, alcoholism, and any addiction, if you have somebody standing there beside you willing to help you, and we have GA rooms that don't ever tell anybody that, you know what, your spouse, your girlfriend, your parent could be by your side helping you with this, if you would just let them know about these meeting rooms. We have 2 Gam-Anon meetings in the entire state of Nevada, and they're all in Southern Nevada. I go to both of them, and they're in Southern Nevada, there's nothing in Northern Nevada. I mean, why is this? There's hundreds of GA meetings in the entire state of Nevada, but 2 Gam-Anon meetings.
We have the same situation. We have 2 Gam-Anon meetings in the state of Colorado. And I think our Gam-Anon meetings operate pretty close. I am close to the person who does the Monday night meeting, and I know that her and I are on the same page with most things. I I would say, uh, I think it becomes, a laziness. I think it becomes a situation where people who've been in that room, even though we say, we don't have any self-appointed leaders, we're but trusted servants. I think sometimes when you have people who've been there a long time, that self-appointed leader mentality can absolutely happen without any ill intent at all, without you even realizing. And we have that same situation. My husband and I talk about this a lot. Uh, People in my room know they cannot trust words. They have to only trust behavior. So, what behavior? What behavior at the very beginning do you trust? Well, I tell them we should trust their page 17. Those are the behaviors. Are they going to meetings? Do they have a sponsor? Are they answering the phone or using their phone list? Are they participating in meetings? Have they had a pressure relief meeting? All of those things are listed on their page 17. And what's so interesting to me is when a gambler will have a relapse and the spouse will come back into Gam-Anon and they'll say, well, we've had a relapse. Okay. So we haven't seen you at a meeting in 6 months. Well, life got busy and we went on vacation and we couldn't make it. Okay. Um, so let me get this straight. Of the 8 things on the page 17, your husband was doing one and he was doing it half-assed. Uh, he was going to meetings, but he was going to one meeting a month, and then he wasn't going to any meetings a month, and he was doing zero. After he stopped going to meetings, he was doing zero of the 8 things that GA itself says, "Hey, if you do these things, it's gonna really help you stay clean." They're doing zero. So if they're doing zero, what's the likelihood of relapse? 100%. And it shouldn't be a shock. So I tell people on day one, look, I'm going to tell you right now, if they're not going to meetings at least once a week, quite frankly, they should be going more than that, 2 to 3 times a week. But if they're not going at least once a week, if they're not asking if they can have a sponsor, if they're not asking for a pressure relief meeting, if they're not getting involved and getting engaged, then they're not working a program, they're checking a box. And I am telling these people in my meeting in good faith that their spouse is going to hear about pressure relief, that their spouse is going to hear about sponsorships. So, by God, that better be happening. It should be that no matter where you go in the world, that your Gam-Anon or GA meeting looks the same. But look, Melissa, it's not just GA. I had someone come to my virtual meeting who said, "Hey, I went to a Gam-Anon meeting, a virtual Gam-Anon meeting. I went once and I really didn't know if I wanted to go back. Probably 4 to 6 weeks later, went back and said, 'Hey, could I get a sponsor? Could I get a phone number?' And they told her, 'No, you clearly don't want to work a program. You're clearly not there yet. Until you prove to us that you want to work a program, we're not giving you any phone numbers.'" I, I don't know what possesses someone to do that. I don't know where that fits in our program. So I think one of the reasons I can look back on my past and say, "Hey, when I started going, there were 20 people in the room, in my Gam-Anon room. We had to split up for sharing time because we wouldn't have gotten through it if we had to listen to everybody. And for the last 5 years, I'm lucky if I have 5 people in my meeting. And we should be busting at the seams. The number of people who say, "God, I didn't even know you guys existed."
Yep.
How does that work?
Because GA and Gamma-Non work on what is it? Not promotion, attraction. And that's a frustration for me because I get it. I get it, like, in the '50s, that was how it worked. But welcome to the next century where people are really struggling, and I know there's a lot of people out there like me who don't even know about gambling addiction. They don't even know it's a thing, they just think this is what their son does, this is what their spouse does. If we can't educate people to learn more about these things, then how are we ever going to help these people?
And I think education really needs to be a component. You need to know what you're looking at. You need to know what you're dealing with. You need to know what the symptoms look like. You need to know what enabling looks like. You need to know all of this stuff in order to protect yourself. And I know for me, I look back and I go, wow, how would my life have maybe looked different had I known what a process addiction was? Had I known how that fits in? I'll hear people say, "Oh, well, my spouse is also a drug addict, also an alcoholic, but they've got that under control, and now this is snuck in." And so I decided to go to Al-Anon, and that's not helping me. Our program looks so different. There is a lot of involvement that we have to have in order to protect ourselves. That education and that behavior that we have to look for. It is It is very different from an Al-Anon program. And I've heard people say, "I went to Al-Anon, and when I told them that I was gonna take over the finances, they said, 'Oh, no, you better not.'" That's his program. He's in charge of that. No, 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 no. No, that doesn't work here. And
We've had counselors tell people that
Mhm,
too. No,
absolutely.
no, give him control of the money so that he can realize the value of it.
I had a marriage counselor tell me, you need to give him back the power of the money and treat him like a man. That's why you're having problems in your marriage. Uh, and I did. And then came the loss of the first house. So, I mean, they don't know uh, the involvement that the family has to have and what we need to look for, how we measure success. It's really important. Have you ever seen the V chart?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this V chart was created a long time ago because I have had this V chart for 30 years. So it's created a long time ago. And I love the V chart because as you go down on the left side of the V down to the bottom, it's the behaviors of the gambler uh, as the addiction progresses and as they reach their bottom. And then the right side is what it looks like as they move up their recovery and they get farther and farther away from their bottom. And I love the V chart as a starting place, but it can't end there because this V chart, it'll say on the left hand side, irresponsible with money and unable to be trusted with finances. And then the right hand side, it will say trustworthy with money, all bills being paid on time. Okay, great. What are all the little things that need to be happening along the way for that to happen? In business, we wouldn't look at someone and say, okay, people, we're going to go from never meeting a deadline to meeting all deadlines. Good luck. We need to have those milestones that we can look at and say, yeah, we're headed in the right direction. Otherwise, it's just a dream.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you.
What's the one thing you consistently hear from new people coming into Gam-Anon that still just kind of makes you go, "Huh? Is this still happening?"
Well, a lot of people obviously say that gambling, compulsive gambling, problem gambling, whatever you wanna call it, is not an addiction, and if they loved you, they would just stop. I hear that almost every time, that somebody new comes in.
That is pervasive thinking out there is this is a choice, and all they need to do is choose me, the loved one, and then everything would be great. And that's where the Gam-Anon person goes down the rabbit hole of, "I guess I'm not lovable enough."
Uh-huh. Exactly. It always comes back to us. Why do we always do that to ourselves? It comes back to us. "Oh, he has a gambling problem. There must be something wrong with me because I'm not making our love life good enough, or I'm just not attractive enough, or I don't do things right." In the why do we always do that to ourselves?
When people think about gambling, they think, "Oh, a gambling addiction is just placing the bet." No,
Mhm.
no. Uh, it was kind of funny when I launched my podcast. I reached out to a couple friends and said, "Hey, launch my podcast, take a listen." I knew for some people, they knew that my husband gambled, but they were clueless around all the specifics that I shared in the podcast. And a friend of mine called me and he said, "Great, listen to the first episode. I had to take a break because I know these people. And the only word I could come up with, Jody, was codependent." And I said, "Well, that's a good word." I think that's pretty accurate. And The next day, I had a conversation with a therapist that lives here in Colorado, and she is one of the premier gambling therapists, been in the space for a very long time. And she said that her and this other therapist will get into great debates over, is it codependency or is it a trauma response? And I had a visceral reaction to that. Uh, I consider myself to be a very strong person. I consider myself uh, to be a problem solver. I don't like the idea that I'm having a trauma response. I would actually much rather be accused of being codependent. At least then I have ownership of it. And I took that conversation to my Wednesday night meeting, and we had a really good conversation about what is trauma, what is codependency, and how we bring a certain level of trauma into this relationship to begin with. So I'm learning to deal with the word trauma and see this through a different lens. What do you think of that?
You know what? I think, maybe part of the reason that people have such a difficult time with the word trauma is because I think a lot of times you think of trauma as being raped, which witnessing a murder, uh, being in a war where you had to kill people, like, extreme levels of trauma, that obviously would really impact somebody, and I think we need to understand that there's different levels of trauma. Being in a relationship where there's verbal abuse is a different level of trauma than, being in a relationship with physical abuse, and I think that being in a relationship with somebody who has an addiction is another level of trauma, and but I also agree with the codependency, you know? I personally, I think that I would like to be on the trauma side, that I've had traumatic experiences in my life that have made me who I am today and so on and so forth, than to think high level that codependency is I cannot be without somebody constantly helping them to live their life kind of thing. And I g I think both of them have their spot in this addiction, if that makes sense.
I think you're right. I think that they do both show up in different ways. It's interesting. You know, we've come so far with drug and alcohol addiction, and the trauma of being married to an alcoholic, being raised by an alcoholic. That's all been established.
Yes.
Uh, it hasn't been established with gambling. You can tell people, no, no, the biggest day for police to deal with domestic violence is Super Bowl Sunday because of domestic violence associated to gambling. They won't believe it. We haven't come that far yet. And as a spouse, I was talking to someone not long ago, and she was in the process of thinking about, gosh, am I going to get a divorce? Am I not going to get a divorce? And her husband was one of those people that has turned physically violent. I haven't seen that a lot, but I do see it, and I have seen it. And she kept saying, but he's only pushed me and grabbed me. He hasn't actually hit me. And we got to talking further, and she said, well, when I addressed his gambling, he told me if I didn't leave him alone, he was going to knock all the teeth out of my head. Look, this is severe emotional and physical abuse. That and I think once relationships hit that point, it is very difficult to come back from.
That just breaks my heart. But and here's the thing, let me say this too, in my previous relationship, I used to actually tell my ex-husband, "I cannot believe that people stay in abusive relationships. I would never stay in an abusive relationship." So that tells you how clueless I was, that I was actually in an abusive relationship and I was staying in it, you know? But when I was thinking about what is an abusive relationship, it was physical abuse, and it wasn't until a friend of mine told me, "I think you're in an abusive relationship," and I laughed at her, and then I went home after spending time with her, and I Googled, "How do you know if you're in an abusive relationship?" And they had a little quiz on there, 9 questions or something like that, and I think I answered yes to, like, 7 of them, and it made me start thinking, "Oh my gosh, what is going on? What is happening? What" I did not expect to find this in my life, you know? And it's terrifying to realize that you're in that situation. That woman, she made it okay for those little things to, "Well, I'll just wait until this happens. Then I'll just wait until this happens." I mean, these are just little things. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm not physically hurt. We make it okay. Why do we do that?
We've been conditioned. We've been
Yeah.
conditioned over decades and decades and decades. And sometimes our family has conditioned us to, depending on what kind of family trauma you bring in, our family has conditioned us. I am a big advocate and believer in marriage. And I'm a believer in what can happen after you go through a recovery program together. I'm a big believer in that. But there are some absolute no goes. There are some no goes that if someone looks at me and says, Jodi, I'm asking you as you tell me, what would you do? I say a lot of times, hey, if you were my daughter, I'd be saying, pack your stuff. I'm on my way to come get you. That's because it does reach a point where turning all of that emotional stuff around is just not going to happen. And you can't do it safely.
Well, and how come? Because I find myself this if this happens to me if this happens to me, well, it's, the it I'll figure it out. But if it happened to you, or if it happened to somebody else's daughter or child or something like that, like, I'm bringing out the boxing gloves. I'm fighting to the death for you because you should not be treated that way, and yet we allow ourselves to be treated that way. I mean, I've joked with friends, when they complain about something that happened with a boyfriend or a husband or something like that. I always tell them, "I have a shovel, you know? Just let me know. I'll come and help you. I have a shovel." But when it the same thing happens to me, I blow it off as, "Oh, I'm just being controlling," or I'm just I don't know, Jody, I feel like we could go for hours on this subject because a lot of it comes down to we I think we don't feel like we're worthy of being taken care of
Right.
being in a positive relationship, and, the frustration to me is there's such a fine line between being where we were in a compulsive gambling relationship and also an abusive relationship, you know? I mean, it's right there, they're side by side on the bus.
I like to say if you were watching it on Lifetime television, would you be
Yeah.
sitting on the couch and going, "What is wrong with you?" No, I mean, you would. And I think that's why after 35 years, I'm still attending Gamma
Mhm.
because it's through that program that I learned that I deserve the same level of advocacy that I would give anyone else. And I learned
Yes.
it's going to be challenged. That's going to be challenged in your job. It's going to be challenged in your family. It's going to be challenged when you have a 2-year old. It's going to be, I mean, it's constantly going to be challenged. And so if you are living the program and that program infiltrates every aspect of your life, then you are learning to advocate for yourself and you are learning to put yourself on the radar and you are learning to be kind to yourself and be forgiving of yourself. And you're learning to do that because you married a gambling addict. And I often say, if something happens to my husband and he's not around anymore and I don't need to go to Gamanon anymore, I'm still going. I'm still going. It has been the cheapest damn therapy I've ever had
Yes.
and
Yes.
the most consistent, and I'm a project manager, process improver, so I measure against outcomes, and I'm like, "Look, if I had to measure and say, what is the success of this program in my life?" There are so many successes that I can relate back to going on Wednesday night to a Gam-Anon meeting. And I used to say, "Look, my Barbie RV never went to a Wednesday night Gam-Anon meeting. This was not part of my dream." But you know what? That Barbie RV went to a Wednesday night Gam-Anon meeting, and Barbie and Ken are still together. So I think that's the best outcome.
Yeah, and you know what? I would still go because as an older person, I feel like we really struggle with friendships.
Mhm.
Making friends, keeping friends, because everybody's life kind of moves on. And I know as soon as I walk into that room, it's going to be filled with friends. I actually have more friends now than I have had probably since high school. And I always tell people, oh, you're struggling to find friendships? Go to Gamanon. I mean, seriously, those people are there for me. They let me call them at any time of the night. I put my phone on do not disturb at night, and I put all of my Gamanon people on the list of it's okay to go through. So if they need somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning, it will ring through to me and I will answer it. And I will be there for them if I have to drive to their house or just talk to them on the phone. But these people are real friends, not just people you work with friends who, when you leave the job, they don't even remember what your telephone number is. These people are people that I will be friends with until my dying day. And I 100% agree with you. I will be in that room making new friends as I go and being there for people. And these are true friendships.
They are friends that are going to tell you the truth. They are
Yes.
friends that aren't going to, they're not going to let you go off the cliff. Buffalo's off the cliff. W- I I used to say, if I want to be mollycoddled and lied to and felt sorry for, I'll go to my family. If I want
Mhm.
the truth, I'll go to a Gam-Anon meeting. And they
Yep.
would tell me the truth. And on many occasions, I walked into that meeting in self pity and I gave my therapy, and they responded with "You need to get your shit together." They would tell me the truth, and the truth always made me a better person.
Yes. And you won't be judged for
Mm,
that
mhm,
as well, or given, like, ridiculous information, like, "Well, just tell them to stop."
yeah, mhm.
But yeah.
It's true. Well, as we discussed before I hit the record button, we could talk all day.
Yes.
We now have a healthy crossover episode, Melissa, and I think we should do this more often. We may do this
Yes.
a couple times a year, do a nice little crossover, and give both of our listeners a little. uh, different way of learning what we know.
Absolutely. I any viewpoint because what I say might not resonate with people, but how you say it or what you do or those types of things may equally resonate with people. And I do have to point out that you're part of Evive, right?
I am.
Yeah, so am I, just recently.
That's
So,
fantastic.
yeah,
So for
Evive. So tell them
listeners,
what
tell them.
Evive is.
You tell them.
No,
You
you
tell them.
tell them.
Okay. eVive, I like to explain it this way. If you're familiar with the app Noom for weight loss, have you ever been on the app Noom for weight loss?
I think I was, like, when it first came out.
I was too. But it you go on to Noom and it gives you daily affirmations and it sets up things that you need to look for and it sends you messages and there's community groups on there. It's a place for you to go and live out your weight loss journey. And when I went on to eVive, I got that sense that it was really it was initially established as a place for gamblers to go and live out their recovery journey. So they've got community groups, they've got chat rooms, they've got a podcast. You can sign up for notifications and affirmations and check-ins and things like that. And the person who founded it is someone with lived experience, which always for me creates a safety net. That's like the first checkbox that says, is this a legitimate resource? And they recently added their friends and family section of the app. It's very new. I think when I joined, there was only 3 other people in there, but I think it's gonna take off, and it's gonna be an interesting place to be. I actually had a talk with the founder last week. I've got another talk with him next week, and really impressed with his dedication to making this happen. A business like this, a venture like this does not happen without some real sacrifice. So I really am getting a good feeling out of eVive. Now I'm
And the best
also
part about it too, Jody, is that it's free
Mhm.
for anybody. It's paid for by the states, I believe,
Yes,
if I'm correct on that. So you can sign up, you can do it totally for free, and that's a big thing for people who have been caught in this gambling addiction thing is you don't wanna put one more penny towards anything that you don't have to.
right.
So I do appreciate that.
That is a fantastic benefit. I also just recently joined the National Council on Problem Gambling, and so I'm on that as well. I'm more unsure of how that's going to benefit me than eVive, but I'm willing to reach out and see where that resource fits for family and spouses.
Uh-huh.
And then later today, I am going to start my certification. Now, do you have your certification?
For peer support?
Yes.
I don't, but I
Okay.
am looking into getting it, yes.
I think we should do it together, Melissa. So I am going to start that because I've been around for 35 years, but there's no question there's still things I don't know.
Mhm.
And when I heard that peer support certification existed through the International Problem Gambling and Gaming Certification Board, that I thought, okay, well this makes sense. So I am going to give that a shot, go through it, and say, okay, is there anything here that can enhance the experience others have when they interact with me for reasons around gambling?
Exactly. And that's the thing too is that, while we were talking about GA and Gamanon, there are a boatload of other places that you can go that you can get help. I mean, some people just they struggle with the GA and the Gam-anon for whatever reason that it is, but you need to understand, listeners, please, that those are not the only places that you can go anymore. There are a ton of places that you can go for help, and you can most certainly always reach out to me or reach out to Jodi. And, we know a lot of people from a lot of different states. So if you ever have any questions, you don't know where to start, reach out to one of us. We will absolutely respond to you and point you in a direction that that we think could be a good starting point for you. I always recommend GA or Gam-anon as a starting point. If you don't want to stay there for the rest of your life, then by all means don't. But also don't reinvent the wheel. They have all these people, they have all these connections for you already. They know counselors who know how to deal with people who have problems with gambling. Don't go out there and just start interviewing counselors and find out that none of them know anything about gambling when we've got a list of them at our meetings, or, financial advisors that know about this, so that you're not being given the wrong information like Jody was, where no, nope, give them full control of the money so that they can take control of everything? So that's why I always say start there, stay for, a year or a couple months or whatever it is so that you can start getting your bearings and breathe a little bit because it will help.
That is great
Yeah.
advice. Great
Yeah.
advice. Don't recreate the wheel. And look, when you find out you're in this mess, it's overwhelming.
Oh, it's terrifying.
And something as simple as, oh, hey, just go online and look for resources. The
Mm-mm.
act of doing that could be more than most people can even wrap their head around.
Exactly.
And I've told people, you know what? Let me look for you. I'll look for you. I'll email that name to you. What can I do for you? Because it is really overwhelming.
It is, and especially if you don't even know what you're supposed to be Googling for.
Mm.
I mean, that makes me mad just on a regular basis, let alone when I'm in crisis mode and I'm trying to figure out what is supposed to be happening, what I'm supposed to be looking for. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be Googling. And then you find out that most of the stuff that comes up is for the gambler anyway. So,
Right.
you know,
Oh,
it can be very disheartening.
I'll tell you that the catalyst for me starting my business and starting the podcast, a very good friend of mine came to me and said, "Hey, we've got a family member who I know you know that this family member probably has a gambling problem, but I am now starting to get really worried about it. Do you have any resources?" Okay. Aside from Gam-anon, I went online, I started Googling, I started trying to find something, and it was really disheartening because
Mhm.
me, with 35 years of experience, couldn't find the resources. And I went back to him and I said, "I am so sorry. I don't have much for you." And he goes, "Well, I feel better hearing you say that because I couldn't find much either." He goes, "Jody, you're probably just going to have to do it yourself." And that was the catalyst for really saying, "Okay, I guess why not me? I guess now it's time." So yeah, it's a difficult thing. It's not easy to find the help.
Yes. And I agree, I will go back on, the website because 'cause I've looked at it. I can't tell you, I must look at it, like, once a month, and I think about doing the peer support. So I will go back on the website for probably the 97th time,
Mhm.
and, I will see about that.
Well, and I think your local chapter of the Problem Gambling Council may have grant money to pay for it if you sign up under the local chapter. I know Evive expects to have that as part of their foundation as well. They just aren't at a place of doing that yet. So,
Mhm.
uh, there are some ways that I think the cost can be less.
Yeah. Well, definitely let me know how it goes if I don't get signed up in order to do
Okay.
it with you.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, we should probably let our listeners go. This is going to be a long one.
I know. Thank you for so much for listening, like, for sticking with us, and I do agree we should do another one of these again soon.
We will. We'll do it between wedding number 2 and wedding number 3. How about that?
That's right.
That's what I can commit to right now.
Oh my gosh, poor you, I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's all happy stuff. It's all happy stuff. But thank you, Melissa, for going through this with me and being a resource for me. I'm not on an island. There's lots of people with me, and I appreciate you being one of them.
I appreciate you too, Jody,
All right.
and, it's nice to travel with somebody by your side.
You have been listening to Survival Strategies for Anyone Who Loves a Gambling Addict, a production of Boundarywise Consulting. Receive an alert when our next episode airs by following or subscribing on your podcast platform. The thoughts, opinions, and observations of the host are drawn from over 35 years of lived experience, involvement in state and local organizations, and industry awareness, as well as meaningful connections with thousands of spouses, parents, children, siblings, and friends whose lives were impacted by someone else's gambling. You can schedule an appointment with Jodi or learn more about our workshops and other services by emailing Jodi, Jodi, at boundarywiseconsulting.com. Thanks for listening.